The party planner had strung white lights from every rafter of the Hilliard Country Club's East Ballroom, and a magician in a top hat was pulling colored scarves from behind children's ears. And my daughter was laughing at something, the club president's wife said, and none of it, not one bit of it, felt like a birthday party for an 8-year-old boy. But I wasn't there to judge the decorations. I was there because Max had asked me 3 weeks before, with that gap-toothed grin he'd inherited from his mother, "Grandpa, are you bringing the chest?" He meant the toy chest, the one I'd been building in the garage since January, hand-cut dovetail joints, sanded smooth as river stone, with his full name carved into the lid in the same lettering style my father had used for mine 60 years ago. A Graves family tradition, 3 generations of it. I carried it in myself, no one offered to help. What happened next is something I have replayed in my mind every day since. My daughter saw me coming across the ballroom with the chest under one arm, and for just a flicker of a second, I saw something in her face that looked like the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. Then her husband materialized at her side, and her expression closed like a window being shut. "Dad," she said it the way you say check when you want someone to know they've made a wrong move. Not a greeting, a warning. For Max, I set the chest on the edge of the gift table. Took me 4 months, solid cherry wood. Same design my father built for me when I was his age. Oh, for heaven's sake. Grady stepped in front of it like he was blocking a doorway. He said it loud enough that the 3 couples nearest to us paused their conversations. He looked at the chest the way someone looks at a stain on a new shirt. "Is this a garage project? You brought a garage project to a $14,000 catered event?" My daughter laughed. It was not a warm laugh. It was the kind you produce when you are embarrassed and you want everyone around you to know that you, at least, are in on the joke. "Dad, we appreciate the thought." She touched my arm once, briefly, like she was tagging a base. "But we have a theme. The decorator specifically said everything had to be coordinated." "It's a toy chest," I said. "It looks handmade." "It is handmade." Grady picked it up, not gently, and handed it to a passing server. "Storage, please, somewhere out of the way." Then he turned to me with the tired smile of a man who has decided to be patient with someone he considers slow. "Winston, we love that you try. But Max has a tablet, a gaming setup, an electric scooter. What's he going to do with a wooden box?" He gestured at the room. "Look around. This is what real giving looks like, not a craft fair." I looked at my grandson across the room. Max had spotted me. He was craning his neck, trying to see past the catering tables, looking for the chest. I gave him a small nod that I hoped meant everything is fine, and nothing about it was true. I didn't make a scene, I didn't raise my voice. I am not a man who raises his voice. I said, "Enjoy the party," and I found a chair near the exit, and I sat in it for 40 minutes until the cake was cut, and then I went to the parking lot. The chest was in the dumpster behind the building. A server must have carried it out. I put it in my trunk without a word to anyone. But what my daughter and her husband didn't know as I drove home that night was that the business they believed they owned had never truly been theirs to keep. Not the 12 stores, not the operating accounts, not the building with the Dublin, Ohio address where we all lived, the one I had paid cash for in 2003 and titled into a family LLC the day the ink dried on the deed. I am Winston Graves, and I built a regional building supply company over 41 years from a single location, and a used delivery truck, and a business loan that kept me awake more nights than I care to count. And this is the story of what happens when patience finally runs out. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace and preserving a relationship that was already gone, leave me a comment below. I read everyone. Marion died 3 years before that party. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, and if you want to know what grief does to a person's sense of time, it collapses it. The year after she died exists in my memory as a single long afternoon with no distinguishable moments. My daughter had suggested I move in. "You shouldn't be alone, Dad. We have the space." What she meant, I came to understand slowly, was that they needed someone to manage the house, watch Max after school, accept deliveries, and be available on demand. I was convenient, and I was grieving, and I told myself that proximity to family was healing, and by the time I admitted it wasn't, I had already signed the company over. Not as a gift, as a trust. Prescott Hale had drafted the agreement himself. He had looked at me over his reading glasses, the way he always did when he thought I was being too generous, and said, "There's a recall clause in here, Winston. If the terms are violated, you retain full rights to reclaim every asset in this structure. Do you understand what that means in practice?" I told him I understood it perfectly. That was 4 years ago. Celeste had hugged me and cried and promised everything a daughter promises when her father hands her everything he built. Grady had shaken my hand with both of his, the gesture he used when he wanted something, and said he would protect the legacy. And then the years passed and the promises dissolved, the way they always do when they're built on convenience rather than character. I drove home from the country club and went to the basement. My 400 square feet of finished concrete with the cast-off furniture from when they'd redecorated the main floors. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I did not feel anger. I felt the particular quiet that comes after you've been making excuses for someone for a long time and you simply stop. The fog lifting, the ground solid underfoot. I picked up my phone. It was 11:40 at night. Prescott answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "No hello, Prescott never wastes words." "It's time," I said. A pause, the sound of ice shifting in a glass, the recall clause? "All of it. The stores, the accounts, the company vehicles. Execute it tonight and the house. Issue a notice of vacancy from the LLC by morning." "Where are you going, Winston?" "I have a place," I said. "I've had one for a year." Because patience is not the same thing as weakness, and I want to be clear about that. I had known for 12 months that Grady was stealing from the company, not rounding up on expenses. Stealing, 80,000 here, 120,000 there, buried in vendor accounts and labeled as fleet maintenance and regional marketing. I had read every transaction because Prescott had never fully closed my read access on the accounting system, and I had documented everyone. I had watched and waited, because exposing it while I was still inside their orbit would have been a scenes, and a scene would have been temporary. I needed it to be permanent. The night they threw my grandson's toy chest into a dumpster was the night I stopped waiting. I packed what mattered, 3 changes of clothes, Marion's photograph, a thumb drive, and the chest, which I wrapped in a moving blanket and placed in the back seat like it was precious, because it was. I drove to a rented apartment in Worthington I'd been paying for since the previous April. Prescott knew about it. Nobody else did. I slept better than I had in 3 years. By 7 the next morning, my phone showed 19 missed calls. I made coffee and watched the city lighten through the window and imagined, with reasonable precision, the scene unfolding across town. Grady reaching for his banking app early, the way he always did, because buying things first thing in the morning made him feel like a man in command of his life. The app loading, the balance reading 0, him refreshing. 0 again. The business credit card declined. The company login returning an access error. The flagship store on I-270, all 12 locations, rerouted to Prescott's office line. And then, eventually, the house. The realization that the property they'd been living in was titled to the Graves Family LLC, which I controlled. Which meant the eviction notice the LLC attorney had couriered to the front door at 6 a.m. was entirely valid. I knew Grady would figure that part out last. He'd never read the documents carefully, because men like him assume the old man in the basement has stopped paying attention. Prescott called at 9. "She went to the flagship store," he said. "Security met her at the door. Grady has left 4 voicemails for me. The last one used language I won't repeat. And Max. At school, I have someone watching the building." Max was the one part of this that felt like walking on broken glass. He was 8 years old, and he loved both of his parents, and he didn't understand what any of this was, and he was going to pay a price for their choices, and there was no way to prevent that entirely. All I could do was shorten the duration of that price. By afternoon, Celeste had left me a voicemail that began with tears and ended with threats. By evening, Grady's message was only threats. I saved them both and sent the files to Prescott. On the second day, they went for Max. Celeste picked him up from school early, told the front office it was a family matter, and drove him to her sister's apartment on the west side. That evening, My phone buzzed with a video call from Max's tablet. I answered. Max was on screen in a bedroom I didn't recognize, wearing his school clothes. His eyes were red. Someone off camera said, "Go ahead, buddy. Tell Grandpa what you told me." I watched my grandson's face with the attention of a man who has loved this child since the first hour of his life. I could see he had been coached. I could see he was trying to hold something steady inside himself. "Grandpa," he said, "Mom says you're sick. She says you're confused. She says you need to come home so the doctor can check on you." He stopped, swallowed. "I want you to come home." "Tell him," said the voice off camera, Grady's voice. Max's left hand moved to his right forearm and rubbed it. The unconscious movement of a child who has been hurt and is trying not to show it. Something went cold inside me. Not anger. Anger is hot and imprecise. This was older than anger, quieter and far more focused. "Max," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Are you safe? Are you okay right now?" "Tell him," Grady said again, off camera. "I love you, Max," I said. "I'm going to see you very soon. That's a promise." I ended the call. I called Prescott. "His arm," I said. He was rubbing his right forearm. "Something happened. We can't know for certain from." "I know Grady," I said. "File the emergency custody petition tonight and send the full financial audit to the Franklin County Prosecutor's office first thing in the morning. Everything. The embezzlement documentation, the wire records, the LLC registered in his mother's name in Arizona. All of it." Prescott was quiet for a moment. "If we go to the prosecutor, this becomes federal, Winston. Wire fraud. He could be looking at significant time." "Good," I said. The next morning, I dressed in the best suit I owned, a charcoal wool I'd bought for Marion's funeral and hadn't worn since, because nothing after that had seemed like an occasion that deserved it. I put on the watch my father had given me the year I opened the first store. I looked in the mirror at a 66-year-old man who had built something from scratch and handed it, in good faith, to someone who'd never understood what it cost. Then I walked out. Prescott met me in the lobby of the Franklin County Courthouse at 9. Celeste arrived 20 minutes later with a lawyer. Young, polished, the kind of confident that comes from not having lost yet. Grady was not with her. He'd been met by federal agents at Renee's apartment at 7 that morning and was currently across town, in a room with no windows, explaining to an FBI forensic accountant why $840,000 in Graves' supply company funds had been moved to an LLC in his mother's name. Celeste stopped when she saw me across the hallway. Not the look she'd given me at the country club. Something different. The look of a person who has fundamentally misread something and is only now understanding how badly. "Dad," her voice was smaller than I had heard it in years. "Celeste, you can't take Max, he's my son." "He's my grandson," I said, and someone put their hands on him. Grady didn't mean. She stopped. Her lawyer touched her elbow. "It was one time. He was frustrated." "It was enough," I said. The hearing took 2 hours. Prescott presented the trust structure, the LLC title documentation, the forensic accounting summary. Judge Harmon, a careful woman who had clearly heard every variety of family collapse and was surprised by none of them, read each document without rushing. Celeste's lawyer used the word senile once. Judge Harmon looked up from the page when he said it with an expression that retired that line of argument immediately. Then Prescott played the video call, Max rubbing his arm, Grady's voice off screen. "Tell him what we talked about." The courtroom was very quiet. "The child was examined the following morning," Prescott said. "There is bruising on the right forearm consistent with grip pressure." Celeste put her hand over her mouth. I watched her face, and I tried to find the daughter I remembered. The one who used to bring me coffee in the garage on Saturday mornings, who used to ask me to explain why different woods had different weights, who used to fall asleep in the truck on the drive home from the hardware trade show and wake up embarrassed and pretend she hadn't. She was in there somewhere, but she had made choices, and choices accumulate. They leave marks. "Mr. Graves," Judge Harmon said, "you're requesting emergency guardianship." "Yes, Your Honor. And you can provide stable housing, schooling, continuity of care for the child." "I can. I also have 37 years of being the most consistent adult presence in that boy's life." She signed the order. I picked Max up from Renee's apartment that afternoon. When he came to the door and saw me standing there, not through a screen, not at a party, just standing there in my suit with the toy chest in both arms, cleaned up, the lid resanded where the dumpster had scratched it, he stopped in the doorway. "You fixed it," he said. "It wasn't broken," I said. "Just needed some attention." He put his arms around me, and I held him there on the threshold and didn't say anything for a moment. He smelled like the same cheap shampoo Marion used to buy in bulk from the warehouse store, and I thought about that for a second, and then I let it go. "Are we going somewhere?" Max asked. "Somewhere with a real garage," I said. "You're going to help me build the shelves." We walked to the car. I put the chest in the back seat, same place I'd carried it from the country club parking lot 4 nights before. Max buckled himself in and looked out the window as we pulled away from the curb. "Grandpa," he said after a while, "were you really confused? Mom said you didn't know what you were doing." "I was never confused, Max," I said. "I knew exactly what I was doing the whole time." He thought about that. "Then why did you leave without telling anybody?" I kept my eyes on the road and thought about how to give an 8-year-old something true without giving him something too heavy to carry. "Sometimes," I said, "the only way to help people understand the weight of their choices is to let them feel it. And sometimes you can't fix something from the inside. You have to step all the way outside of it to fix it properly." He was quiet for a moment. "Like how you said you can't tell if a board is solid until you pick it up." "Exactly like that," I said. Grady pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud 11 weeks later. Restitution was ordered. A sentencing date was set. The details appeared in the Columbus Business Journal, and the social world Celeste had spent years building, evaporated with the efficiency of people who were never really her friends to begin with. She called me once, 2 months after the hearing. She said she was sorry. I believe she was. In the way people are sorry when the consequences have fully arrived and there is nothing left to protect. I didn't hang up. I listened. I told her the door wasn't closed, but that reopening it was her work to do, and it would take time, and I was not in a hurry. She asked about Max. I told her he was well, that he'd started a woodworking class at the community center on Saturday mornings, that he'd made a small step stool with a dovetail joint that was cleaner than anything I'd managed at his age, that he kept the toy chest at the foot of his bed and used it for his baseball cards, and a paperback about dinosaurs he was too old for but refused to give away. She went quiet. "I knew what Grady was going to say when you walked in with it," she said finally, "at the party. I saw your face when you came through the door and I knew, and I didn't stop him." "No," I said, "you didn't." "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know, Celeste." I hung up gently. There is a difference between ending a conversation gently and ending it kindly, and I have spent 66 years learning the distance between them. Out in the garage, Max was sanding the corner of a birdhouse he'd been working on for 2 weeks. He had his tongue pressed against his upper lip the way he did when he was concentrating. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment, the October light coming in flat and golden through the open door, the smell of sawdust and dried leaves, and someone's chimney smoke from down the street. I went in and picked up a sanding block. "You're going with the grain," I said. "That's right. But shorten your stroke near the edge or you'll round it off." He adjusted without argument, the way a child does when he trusts you. We worked until the light changed, and neither of us said much, and the silence between us was the most peaceful thing I had known in years. My name is Winston Graves. I built something once, from nothing, with my hands and my wife beside me, and 40 years of patience. And then I had to build something again, smaller, quieter, no ledgers involved. The second time was harder, but the second time I knew exactly what I was building it for.